Jennifer. I'm going to try and come in tomorrow to sign those things for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. We're settled. City Council special meeting and work session, Tuesday, December 8th. I'd like to call to order and I need approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Okay. First item is the public comment. On my list, I have Daryl Johnson. Is that for a general statement? Because we don't need hearing stuff yet.
It was for a general one about the elementary school, and he was going to try to either be on by Zoom or phone. But I didn't hear from him about his phone number, so Rusty's looking for him on his Zoom.
Yeah, I don't see a phone.
And I have his phone number if you need it.
Okay, so far the only phone number I saw was Jan's, I believe.
I don't think it was about the school. I think it was about the roses.
That was, the email he sent was about school.
Huh?
He sent us an email asking to speak about the school.
Oh,
Maybe I'll talk about both.
I talked about both because he talked
I don't
about it.
see him on the list.
And we let him know that the topic tonight about the school was just about the schedule and that we would be doing the formal public input coming up as well, so. But he was our only general public comment.
Okay. He's the only one that signed up. Let's just keep an eye out for him and maybe we can slip him in later if he shows up.
Do you want his phone number? Anybody?
No.
I'm sure he'll call in if he's running late.
Let him call in. I'd rather get things started and rather than wait for somebody. Okay, so we'll move on. But do keep an eye out for him because I'm not watching that.
Okay.
First item then will be public hearing on AP 2003 and AP 2004. This is a hearing regarding the appeal request by Stan and Rebecca Roberts and Haystack Rock LLC appeal of Planning Commission denial of AA 2002, 3, and 4 of the city's administrative decision to approve with conditions the development permit DP 2004 of tax lot 51031 AA 00600. Two appeals have been filed, one from the Roberts and the other from the Haystack Rock LLC. The appeals will be heard together in one process. I will open the public hearing. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the City Council to hear this appeal at this time? Does any councilor believe he or she has a personal bias to declare? Does any councilor believe he or she has a conflict of interest? Has any councilor had an ex parte contact or made a site visit?
Site visit.
I visit.
Yeah. Is there any additional correspondence other than what we have?
There was additional correspondence posted on the website earlier today, and I sent an email to the counselors about it.
That's all.
Great. Okay, Jeff.
All right. Thank you. And I'm just going to go by the amended staff report, which is dated December 8th. And I'm going to try to keep it to 15 minutes, just like everybody else. I'll just start with the summary. The first appeal, AP 2003, is a request to overturn the Planning Commission's decision and can basically be summarized into 5 areas of concern. And in the staff report, I outlined the main 5 areas that just go by the topics that we'll be covering here in a minute. The second appeal, APP 2004 Haystack Rock LLC, by contrast, is in agreement with the Planning Commission's decision and wishes to supplement the grounds of the Planning Commission decision to further the findings on 10 grounds, And I go into those 10 in this discussion. In the following discussion, the bold language in the staff report summarizes the arguments made by the appellants and then followed by the staff's discussion. The Roberts appeal of the Planning Commission findings first spends some time discussing procedural complexities of the underlying administrative decision. And the procedural complexities can be boiled down into a rather simple notion. The staff required an oceanfront setback survey, an OSS, to identify the oceanfront setback line, OSL, prior to building plan review by issuance of a development permit, DP 2004 with conditions. The applicant has appealed that decision and the Planning Commission has upheld the administrative decision. Any error in the procedural matters has either been raised and decided by the Planning Commission or is waived. At this point, the Roberts appeal does not identify any error in the Planning Commission's review of the administrative appeal, and therefore this staff report will not address these issues further. The challenge PC decision misinterprets and misapplies Cannon Beach Municipal Code 174250A6, which is the ocean setback line. The evidence in the record of sworn declarations by Mr. Raskin and summary by Ms. Pearson in no instance refutes the findings by the Planning Commission, confirming the administrative decision. This is indeed a lot abutting an ocean shore. There's no instance presented in the record of a single survey or approved building permit since the adoption of the oceanfront setback standard in 1994, where an oceanfront setback line was not required. There are indeed many instances of homes along the presidentials, the area from West Harrison to West Adams, referred to in Mr. Raskin's statement, that were built without an OSL. But those were built well before the adoption of the oceanfront setback standard. Although the applicant states that it is noteworthy the city never put any of the claimed city's record of this matter, under Oregon law and Cannon Beach Municipal Code, the appellant shall bear the burden of proof to show that all criteria have been met. There is no evidence in the record that a home was built without the OSL after 1994 or any surveys of those built prior to 1994 that abide by the 15-foot rear front yard setbacks that would be required. Number two, state laws adopted in 2019 designed to improve the state's commitment to housing allow the city to develop Ocean Avenue without affordable housing. As such, the fact that the Roberts and Haystack Rocks properties are separated from the ocean by Ocean Avenue mean that neither are a lot abutting the ocean shore. In order to be subject to the OSL, the property must abut the ocean coordinate line or be a lot where there is no buildable lot between it and the OCL. The applicant's lot does not directly abut the OCL, but is separated by the undeveloped Ocean Avenue. The applicants argue that a recently passed state law, 197-799, which allows for housing development of public property, makes Ocean Avenue a buildable lot, and therefore their lot does not meet the definition as a lot abutting the ocean shore. There are many reasons that 197-779 does not affect this application. The primary difficulty is that the land that underlying Ocean Avenue isn't simply at the discretion of the city to utilize at will as affordable housing, but rather as stated on the plat that the land was dedicated to the public for its use as a thoroughfare forever. Indeed, if the city chose to vacate the Ocean Avenue right of way, as in any right of way in the city, the property would automatically revert to the property owners to the west and east of the center line of the vacated land, meaning half would go to the state and part of the Ocean State Park system and the other half to the Roberts. Furthermore, such land vacated, even that owned by the state, would be required to abide by the statewide land use planning, go specifically Goal 18 beaches and dunes of the Oregon Ocean Bill. 3, Haystack Rock LLC property is so large that under the city's buildable lands inventory, a plot capable of delivering at least 2 additional houses separates the company's property from the ocean. Regardless, the Ocean Avenue is also plausibly interpreted as a plot that separates Haystack Rock structure from the Oregon coordinate line. Staff responds, because the ocean front setback is measured from other buildings on lots abutting the ocean shore, the applicants argue that their neighbor's lot which is also separated from the OCL by Ocean Avenue, also does not meet the definition of a lot abode in the ocean shore. The neighboring Haystack Rock property size, whether or not it is applied all of its buildable density, has nothing to do with the current application. Cannon Beach Municipal Code determination of the oceanfront setback line has nothing to do with potential lots, plots, buildings, or anything else. It simply accounts for those buildings that are existing at the time of the oceanfront setback survey. The applicant's tortured reading of the code to argue that there is buildable land remaining in the Haystack Rock property and that Ocean Avenue right-of-way could be considered a plot of land to be included in this buildable land scenario, but that just isn't the case. As discussed above, Ocean Avenue cannot be plausibly interpreted as a plot of land. It is a right-of-way as platted and so distinctly stipulated from lot. Number 4, the proper application of city codes oceanfront setback line averaging exercise yields a setback consistent with the setbacks that Roberts proposed in the original application. And staff states, the applicant's arguments on this point argue that the OSL should be determined by averaging setbacks on lots with no buildings on them. Cannon Beach Municipal Code A6 of 174250 cannot be more clear that lots without buildings as defined in 6B as the residential and commercial structures on a lot, which even goes so far as to say does not include accessory structures, are not to be averaged. In fact, it states in C3, calculate the average of the setbacks of each of the buildings identified, clarifying those instances where a building is not found in D. If there are not buildings identified by subsection A6C1 of this section, the oceanfront setback line shall be determined by buildings that are located 200 feet north and 200 feet south of the parcel side lot lines. In other words, there's not a zero to be averaged into any calculation. Sections B, the challenged PC decision reflects an interpretation of the OSL that is contrary to state law and may not be applied. 2, the city's oceanfront setback rule 174250A6 are not clear and objective as state law requires for them to be applied. To the extent state law requires that the standard the city applies to this house must be clear and objective. LUBA has held that the fact that a particular standard requires some interpretation does not necessarily mean that a standard is not clear and objective. If it does not require a subjective value-laden analysis, you see SE Neighborhoods Neighborhood Association Eugene applying this to the oceanfront setback line. The city has approved every home built in the OM zone since the adoption of the 1994 oceanfront setback standards without objection by any of its local surveyors or engineers. The survey produced by Scott Cooter and CKI for the Roberts property and included in the record is clear and objective evidence the proposed residential building is not in compliance with the OSL. As further described in the Planning Commission decision, the OSL is clear and objective. 3, decision impermissibly, it reduces the floor area of the Roberts home. The applicants argue that the Planning Commission's decision violates state law by condemning it on the reduction of the floor area of the proposed home. In the first instance, it is not clear that the requirement even applies to the city's decision. To the extent it does, nothing in the city's decision places any condition on the proposal and the administrative decision of requiring an OSS to determine the oceanfront setback line doesn't necessarily reduce the floor area ratio. Since no building plan or FAR has been reviewed at the time of the decision, regardless, the application of setbacks by their very definition reduce floor areas of buildings, but in no way violates state law. The standards governing the applicable processes are not clear and objective and added unreasonable cost delay to the Roberts housing proposal. As LUBA has held, the state statute prohibits only unreasonable cost and delay, and the normal costs and delays of processing and permit do not violate this statute. When the applicants first approached the city as documented in Exhibit C10 prior to July 2019, they were well aware of the OSS and OSL requirements. Mr. Cooter of SKI Surveying, who eventually did the survey that was produced for the record, had evidently already been contacted, and the city planner had already provided a statement that the property was an oceanfront lot. The length of time it took the applicant to apply for a building permit cannot be blamed on the city. C, the challenged PC decision takes the Roberts property without compensation contrary to federal constitution. Based on the arguments put forward by the applicants, the takings argument appears meritless. The oceanfront setback standard does not prevent the Roberts from building a reasonable dwelling on their lot. It only provides an OSL which they are required to abide by. The CBM, Cannon Beach Municipal also provides other avenues for approval of a reasonable dwelling on the applicant's lot. D, the challenged PC decision improperly interprets and applies the parking requirements. Cannon Beach Municipal Code 1742-60A9, structures in the ocean yard, explains the structures permitted in the ocean yard, while 1790-70, projections into required yards, stipulates what can be constructed in these open spaces for lots abutting the ocean shore. A deck or patio permitted in the required yard may not be closer than 2 feet to the western property line or the Oregon coordinate line, whichever is further east. Patios and decks constructed in a required yard shall not obstruct views of the ocean, mountains, or similar features from abutting property. While none of these speak to parking, CBM C 1742-30 D through F all stipulate that for lots of or right-of-ways that do not consist of a beach, active dunes, or other foredunes, which are conditionally stable and that are subject to wave overtopping or ocean undercutting or interdune areas that are subject to ocean flooding. In addition to the uses permitted in the underlying zone, the following uses and activities are permitted. Parking is part of the residentially permitted uses in the RL district, and as a result, is not prohibited in the setback areas unless specifically prohibited, as can be found in the IN institutional zone 1736-4G and other zones. In turn, the Haystack Rock appeal, the neighbor appellant contends that the Planning Commission findings do not go far enough in their grounds and specify the following grounds. And the specific grounds are as listed. Applicants have not minimized oceanfront hazards to acceptable levels. The release of the development permit for the Roberts property, DP 2004, as stated in the letters to the applicant, Exhibits C3 and 4, sets conditions that must be met prior to construction, including an approved roadway extension of West Nanana roadway, right-of-way permit to allow such access, as well as an approved building permit. The geohazard review of the building plans and other aspects of the building plans have yet to be inspected. As of the issuance of the development permit, the city of Cannon Beach still awaited an oceanfront setback survey, which would allow such a building to be built at the location provided. Thus, the city has made no review or determination on the geological appropriateness of the siting of the structure. The city has a number of easements protecting the dewatering system of drain pipes that run under the neighboring properties to Nana and Hemlock right-of-ways and S-curve areas. The city is well aware of the geologic activity of the area and has secured the easement agreements with various parties to protect the S-curves surrounding properties and city infrastructure. The notion that the Haystack Rock property might remove the dewatering pipes under its property tomorrow would be an unfortunate result for the city's good faith partnership with all of the owners in the area to alleviate this issue for its citizens. But the city will still rely upon the expertise of geohazard professional analysis on whether it is essential for maintaining the integrity of the S-curve area and residential and roadway structures proposed before any roadway or residential structures are approved. In this case, the geohazard professionals indicate, although some impact of the factor of safety of the Roberts lot would be expected with all 19 drains being removed, having just a few drains removed is not expected to appreciably raise the groundwater in the S-curve slide enough to cause instability. This is because of the intentional redundancy in the system of drains two-phase installation, both in elevation and gradient, and the extensive connection of shear zones deep within the slide is observed in instrumentation and blowback communication during drain installation. And you can see Exhibit A26 where that was taken from. Unpermitted city and private tree removal. Any removal of trees must be approved prior to construction. Removal of trees on the subject property has not been approved, as again, the OSL survey and siting of the residents is still in question. Any tree removal in a public right-of-way is subject to a public process as stipulated in Cannon Beach Municipal Code 1770. Yet removal of trees for a building permit does not require a public process. Violation of other oceanfront management overlay zone and related zone standards. Cannon Beach Municipal Code 1742-30 A, B, and C do not apply to the subject property, since the subject property is not lots or right-of-way that consist of the beach, active dunes, or other foredunes, which are conditionally stable that are subject to wave overtopping or ocean undercutting, or interdune areas that are subject to ocean flooding. Instead, the residential development and proposed roadway are subject to the provisions of Cannon Beach Municipal Code 1742-30 D, E, and F. For lots of right-of-way that do not consist of beach, active dunes, other foredunes which are conditionally stable, and that are subject to wave overtopping, ocean undercutting, or interdune areas that are subject to ocean flooding. There are no shoreline structural or non-structural stabilization structures, private or public beach access, or dune grading projects being proposed with this application, and whether any storm outfalls or facilities will be required would be reviewed before the Design Review Board standards of 1744, if and when any such facilities are approved under condition number 4 of the development permit. Violation of local, state, and federal standards for protection of wetlands and stream corridor protection. Subject property is not a wetland lot of record as identified in the 1994 Cannon Beach Local Wetlands Inventory and regulated through Chapter 1743, the Wetlands Overlay Zone of the Cannon Beach Municipal Code. The neighboring Haystack Rock property is a wetland lot of record and contains an identified stream, number 49. The applicant has been required to apply for a development for any grading or fill in the subject property due to its proximity to this stream. But since it impacts no delineated wetland or stream corridor, it is not in any violation of local, state, or federal standard. Just because a site is a collection point for drainage waters or runoff doesn't make it a wetlands area, which are regulated under the Federal Clean Waters Act. Finishing Inspiration Point. The city recognizes the importance of Inspiration Point and is dedicated to keeping the integrity of the site foremost in any decision, and that is why it has required the Oceanfront Setback Survey. However, there are no code provisions that apply to this property other than those identified in the staff report. The proposed flying bridge and unimproved Nanana Avenue is prohibited by the zoning code. The city has required the Oceanfront Setback Survey, which may have impact on not only the siting of the residents, but also the proposed roadway. As stated earlier, the development proposed in this application is not subject to Cannon Beach Municipal Code 1742-30 A through C. And now that the city has seen the Oceanfront Setback Survey and the OSL determination, revised plans will be required to meet these new findings if the Planning Commission's decision is upheld. The proposed flying bridge is in unimproved Nanana is prohibited by Title 12, Cannon Beach Municipal Code. As stipulated in condition number 4 of the development permit, the applicant will be required to meet Title 12 roadway standards before roadway approval. However, review of any roadway in Nanana Avenue is the subject of a different review. The proposed driveway is unsafe. Just as above, any access onto Hemlock will be required to meet city roadway standards prior to approval. This concern is addressed by condition of approval number 4. Applicants do not have a right to build a bridge on or otherwise improve Nanana Avenue. As noted elsewhere, the so-called bridge is not part of the decision and will be handled under the approval of condition 4. In fact, approving an applicant's application for a private driveway bridge over Nanana would violate Oregon code. The city has no intention to surrender its legal right to the Nanana right-of-way and will require access to meet roadway standards from Title 12 before approval. The city is also an adjacent property owner of an avenue right-of-way and thus has every interest in maintaining public access to Inspiration Point property. Summary, the arguments brought forward, the appeal and both the appeal from the applicants as well as the neighboring applicant are insufficient to overturn the Planning Commission's decision and findings. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. As long as there's no questions, we'll go straight to the public testimony aspect. The appeal will be reviewed against the criteria of the Municipal Code, Chapter 1788-140, request for a review of a decision, Chapter 1788-150, requirements of a request for appeal of a Planning Commission decision, and Chapter 1788-170, review on the record and applicable sections of the zoning ordinance. Pertinent criteria will be considered are noted in the staff reports. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the persons testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. City Council shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the mayor, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Testimony is limited to matters which are raised at the Planning Commission hearing or in written orally. Is there a presentation by the appellant for Roberts?
And Mayor, just to make sure, as you recall from the scope of review hearing last week, there were time limits imposed, and those reasonable time limits were 15 minutes for each of the appellants and 5 minutes for members of the public. We didn't talk about it, but generally there's an opportunity to rebut as well. And so in talking with Jeff, typically had 5 minutes at the end for the Roberts non-applicant appellants for a rebuttal, and then 5 minutes for the applicant to have their last word.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, I believe Wendy is first. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Great.
Wendy.
Thank you very much. My name is Wendy Kellington, and I am, can you hear me?
Can.
Yes.
I am the attorney for the applicants and appellants, the Roberts. The Roberts very much look forward to joining the Cannon Beach community to build their home on their residential lot where a previous house stood for 50 years. This is to request that you approve their application as submitted. With the greatest of respect, there is no legitimate reason not to approve their home. Their home meets all standards if they are properly applied, including the ocean setback. As Mr. Roberts will explain, the city's ocean setback contemplates at least 2 structures, one north and one south, to come up with an average setback. When there is only one structure like we have here, you must interpret your code. You should interpret your code to either default to the 15-foot minimum ocean setback or to average the default 15-foot setback to the south and the one structure 200 feet to the north. In either case, the Roberts application meets the ocean setback when it is properly applied as it is written. The point we make here is you have the authority to approve the Roberts application. You, the governing body, have the authority to interpret your code and to approve the Roberts home. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not telling you the truth. There is much angst about the improvement to Nenana Avenue required by the standards in the city's code. Please understand that the city is 100% in charge of what that improvement looks like, and the Public Works Director has significant discretion to decide. The images that opponents show were submitted by the Roberts to the city to let the city know what the road would look like if city standards were strictly applied. The city has discretion to consider alternatives. Ask your Public Works Director. The Roberts have fully cooperated with the city and will continue to do so, and will improve at their own expense Nenana as a public road exactly as the city requires. But it isn't fair for the LLC's lawyers to make fun of and disparage the Roberts for their cooperation and willingness to fully comply with city standards. To the extent you're on the fence about interpreting your own code, state law helps. State law says that when it comes to housing applications like the Roberts, the city is prohibited from applying standards that require the exercise of factual, legal, or policy judgment to interpret them. The city's ocean setback is one of those standards state law prohibits. It has many parts that require factual, policy, and legal judgment and are capable of more than one plausible interpretation. Therefore, the City Council as the governing body should either interpret its own code and apply the 15-foot default ocean setback, or apply state law and come up with the same result. Either way, you would approve the Roberts home, and still it would be 87 feet away from what the PC decision says is the Oregon coordinate line, which yields one of the largest, if not the largest, ocean setback in all the city. But going further and demanding a 119-foot ocean setback under the PC decision interpretation of the city's ocean setback standards cannot be reconciled with state law and requires that you reverse the Planning Commission's denial of the Roberts home. The legislature's clear and objective requirement is serious business. Courts have held that the City of Portland standard measuring the height of a building from the, quote, finished surface of the ground, end quote, is ambiguous and not clear and objective. And all of this is for good reason. The legislature got very serious about housing policy in 2017 and 19 to make it very clear that any standards that were not clear and objective simply can't be applied to housing. And as a matter of sound land use policy, it is not in the city or the state's interest to foreclose residential development of land that the city has zoned for residential use, because that's by definition what causes urban sprawl. The Roberts residential subdivision lot is supposed to deliver housing to the city's citizens, and state law reinforces that has to happen. The legislature also forbade cities from reducing the floor area of housing proposals below the maximum the city code allows. And here again, the PC decision is contrary to state law. The maximum that the city code allows is 3,000 square feet. The Roberts home is below that at 2,712 square feet in floor area. The PC decision denies because the Roberts would not propose to build a significantly smaller home. The PC decision, in fact, means the Roberts can only build a home that is 600 square feet of usable space, and that is not only unreasonable, it's contrary to the state law. This demand for a reduction in floor area is another reason you should reverse the Planning Commission and approve the Roberts home. Certainly the structure that the Roberts wish to call their home, although significantly smaller than their opponent neighbor's 4,180 square foot house to the north, it is just right for their retirement, a 2,012 square foot home in the peace and tranquility of City of Cannon Beach that they love. Certainly, please know that none of the standards that the opponents complain about apply under the express terms of the city's code. The Roberts property is not on a dune or a beach. It is permitted residential development. The active landslide that it and a dozen or more homes in South Hemlock sit upon has been stabilized. And the evidence in the record is unequivocal that the Roberts home will stabilize it further. With regard to trees, the Roberts will remove just 6 trees, 2 pines and 4 alders, one of which is already dead. There is no basis to deny. Certainly, there's no basis to deny this family the right to build their home on their residential lot because they will use the adjoining public right-of-way. The Roberts, just like everyone else, have a right of access to the abutting street right-of-way. They cannot be denied their right to build their home because they plan to use that, or they are willing to improve at their own expense to current public street standards that right-of-way. The Roberts home will be where another stood until the 80s. It will be served by the same right-of-way that served that previous home. And finally, we note that the LLC neighbor has threatened to remove the city's dewatering system that stabilizes the landslide if the city approves the Roberts home. The LLC posits that if they carry through on their threat, the city and its citizens will suffer because they will have destabilized the active landslide that the dewatering system protects. And so they reason you should deny the Roberts their home to avoid the LLC harming the city and its citizens. Despite the remarkable hubris this threat betrays, the fact that the LLC is willing to make it is another good reason to interpret your code to approve and not deny the Roberts home and merely apply the 15-foot default setback and comply with state law. The city should not be held hostage to threats like that. Don Rondema will testify that even if the LLC makes good on its threat, the LLC cannot harm the city. The Roberts have earned the city's approval and respectfully request that you approve their home. Thank you very much for your consideration. Stan?
Stan will be next as we get him unmuted.
Got to be a host. Am I unmuted?
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Stan Roberts. My address is 925 Lake Street South, Unit 201, Kirkland, Washington, 98033. I wish to thank you for your time. And I want to first say that we've gone to Cannon Beach for the last 30 years. We've owned this property for 19 years. It's been my wife and ours dream to build a modest home and retire in Cannon Beach. I first want to talk a little bit about the roadway. Even though our appeal relates to the setback, I truly believe that the Planning Commission's denial of our setback was largely driven by this potentially controversial roadway. And I believe that was the basis for their denial. I also believe that the Planning Commission was influenced by the flyer that our neighbors basically put out that had inaccurate information and was suggesting that our public work director and the city engineers had not completely vetted our engineers' work. That's simply not the case. I also want to talk a little bit about alternatives that Wendy mentioned to this roadway on Nenana. I see there's 3 potential alternatives. The easiest one would be for our neighbors to give us an easement on their driveway. That alternative would not require any tree removal. We are willing to pay them substantial funds to do that, but they have turned us down. And a second alternative, and we've also asked our neighbors to basically, if they would be willing to sell the 2 lots to the east of our and have us build a private driveway from Hemlock, they have also turned that down. So the same neighbors that have drummed up this controversy using the flyer about this horrible road have in their power the opportunity, 2 opportunities to allow us to get to our property without actually using Nenana. As Wendy says, we were willing to work with the city. If the city wants to basically give us an easement on Nenana Avenue and basically allow us to build a driveway instead of a roadway, then we will basically be able to have a much smaller scale type road that would not be as daunting. I want to switch gears to, I'm not an attorney, I want to switch gear to this whole ocean averaging because I think that's kind of the key. And basically, I've read Municipal Code 1742 100 times. I'm not an attorney, but I am a mathematician, and I am familiar with I'm an actuary. I am familiar with averaging, and I know that basically averaging is normally done, almost always done, with 2 or more data points. And there's no doubt in this case, reading the law, that the bill was written to calculate the average of buildings, multiple buildings, buildings plural, meaning 2 or more. And the code goes to great effort to try to find buildings. You look 100 feet to the north, you look 100 feet to the south, and you're looking for buildings. And if you don't find buildings, then you look even further. And that's what happened. There's only one building that does not qualify as buildings. So you look a little further, you look 100 feet more, 200 feet to the north and 200 feet to the south. You don't find buildings. Therefore, the default of 15 feet applies. Now, we can extrapolate. No doubt the person that wrote this bill probably didn't anticipate that this would actually occur. The rare circumstances where a 400-foot piece of land in beachfront only has one home, there's no other place in Cannon Beach where that's true. And you ask yourself, in terms of fairness, what would you do if you had drafted that bill and you knew that this scenario might exist? There's 2 alternatives. One is you would look a little further. If you went out from 100 to 200, maybe you go from 200 to 220. And if you did, you would find a second home to the north. And you could average that with the log cabin and we would comply. The other thing you can do is you can say, well, we don't want to go beyond 200 feet. We don't want to go that far out, but we don't want to give you the default. We want to do an average. And the alternative is, instead of giving us 15 feet, you could average the 119 feet that 114 feet the log cabin has with the 15 feet, and says your default is not 15 feet. It's the average of that. And guess what? We would comply. So what ended up happening is none of these 3 options. We were told that we had to go 119 feet out, which is further than any property in Cannon Beach, and is not, and more importantly, is not what the code says, and it's not an average. So I want to end my talk by saying I understand that as a city council, you will have political pressure to turn this down because there are so many people that have been influenced by this flyer. But all I ask is that you treat us fairly, and I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next on my list is Will Rasmussen. There we go.
You're unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can.
Wonderful. It's good to see you. I'm Will Rasmussen from Miller Nash Graham and Dunn. I represent the appellant Haystack Rock LLC. Haystack Rock LLC owns the abutting property with the historic Oswald West cabin on it. Thank you, Mayor Steidel and council members for hearing this appeal. I'm going to divide my testimony into 2 sections today. First, I'm going to hit on why you have a relatively easy decision regarding the oceanfront setback, how you've got 20 pages of analysis from me and Miller Nash and 20 pages of analysis from staff walking through that rule the city's had and has applied since 1996, and concluding that the city should apply this the same exact way it has applied it since 1996, which just prevents one homeowner from building further west from the abutting homeowners. And that has both a safety component to it, documented in the record, and as I think people know, the coastline gets abused and gets eroded quickly in Cannon Beach and along the Oregon coast, and an aesthetic component. Just when you have oceanfront or any sort of view corridor area, if you create a race to the west, if you will, in this context, it is to the detriment of everybody in the community. Second part of my presentation is going to be about why the city should adopt additional findings. The procedural posture in this case is very unique. It initially came out as an approval with several conditions saying that the applicant needs to do additional things to comply with the code. It's been changed at staff's recommendation and planning commission's unanimous approval to a denial for not being able to meet the ocean shore setback. When that happens, the city doesn't really have a process for having a denial with conditions of approval. As a result, the approval criteria that were conditioned to be met when this was an approval needs to be addressed and discussed and explained why they're not yet met in a denial. Also, there's several other approval criteria that we've documented in the record, and the city should adopt additional findings explaining and finding that those conditions, or those approval criteria just are not met here. So starting with the oceanfront setback, as I mentioned, this has been in the city since 1996. It's been applied without this degree of controversy since that time, and it applies on its face to a lot abutting the ocean shore. And the city even defines that in the code. It's 17.04.320. And it means any lot that abuts the ocean coordinate line or lots where there's no buildable lot between it and the Oregon coordinate line. That is pretty straightforward. The Oregon coordinate line has been defined in statute for decades. It's in ORS 390.770. A lot, the word lot is defined in your code. Pretty clearly, it states that lots means a plot, parcel, a lot, plot, parcel, or tract of land. The buildable lot is not defined in your code, but it's used consistently throughout the zoning ordinance. It's used to indicate a property that qualifies for siting of a dwelling in these residential contexts. As you would expect, a buildable lot means a lot you can build a house on. This usage is completely consistent with state law. ORS 197-286 also defines buildable lands in this context as urban areas that are suitable and available for residential uses. Stated simply, as I think most people here would expect, Ocean Avenue is not a buildable lot. And arguments from applicant that Ocean Avenue is buildable are they just conflict with the code and they conflict with state law, and they're just plain old wrong. And obviously applicant doesn't want to comply with the oceanfront setback here. That's why we've gone through the planning commission, and that's why we're up here on front of council. They're just basically asking the council to not apply this rule that's on your books. And council just doesn't have authority to do that. All of the arguments that applicant has put forth, alleging that this relatively straightforward provision, it's a setback provision, it's not sufficiently clear and objective, is just wrong. It's clear under the definitions that I just walked through that both the subject property, the Roberts's property, and the historic Oswald West home site, the subject property, are both oceanfront lots under that definition because there are no lots between them and the beach that can be built. Pretty straightforward. Applicants advance a number of novel claims that neither property abuts the ocean shore because there's this platted, undeveloped right-of-way. I'm going to talk through that with more detail than I particularly like to go into, but it's unfortunately necessary to be meat and potatoes of applicants' argument on appeal. First, they argue that the right-of-way can be a lot, can't be a buildable lot. That's wrong under the code, and it's wrong under state law because right-of-way and streets are used in different contexts under the code and under state law. These things are not lots. Specifically, even if you look at the ocean shore setback provision in your chapter 17.42, the subject of this appeal, they use the word right-of-way and streets in different contexts, in different contexts in the word lot. If the city meant for a street to be considered a lot, it simply would have said so in the code, and state law would have said it. There have been recent changes in state laws, as applicant notes, trying to advance needed housing and trying to promote residential development. However, none of those things changed the intent and meaning of the oceanfront setback in the city's code that's been on the books long before that state law came around. And it just doesn't change the meaning of these basic terms of lot, right of way, and street that applicant tries to parse to say that right of way is buildable between their lot and the Haystack Rock lot and the ocean. I'd also like to point out the definition section of the city zoning ordinance has separate words for lot and street, which do not overlap in any fashion. Also necessary to applicants' unique interpretation of the ocean shore setback is that Ocean Avenue not only be a lot, but it also be buildable. This is further in error. Subject of this appeal makes abundantly clear that the ocean shore setback itself prevents Ocean Avenue from being buildable. Further, it's an active landslide on the ocean, on the beach. And as a result, Oregon state laws, DSL laws, Oregon Parks and Recreation don't allow you to build a home on the beach. It's just plain old not buildable. You'll find in the record a good amount of discussion from staff and from myself discussing each of these terms in detail and discussing why they are in fact clear and objective. Specifically, these individual words that applicant has called out as being insufficiently ambiguous are sufficiently clear. Those words being lots, ocean coordinate line, buildable, tract, and plot. I would encourage you to look at those if you want, but I would just say in short that these are normal defined terms that LUBA will have no problem upholding. In 2012, LUBA considered a somewhat similar appeal from a appellant contesting whether the word foredune was insufficiently clear and objective, and whether the phrase relatively flat is insufficiently clear and objective. For example, in that case, they argued relatively flat, that could be true flat, or is it 5-degree incline relatively flat, or a 10-degree incline, or a 15-degree incline. Oh my gosh, there's an infinite number of interpretations that that phrase could be interpreted as. And LUBA rejected that and said, no, that's fine. That is sufficiently clear and objective. And in fact, what's prohibited, the true standard in whether a standard is clear and objective, is if it's subjective, value-laden standard. And that is a quote. And read through both our arguments and the arguments from appellant regarding your oceanfront setback. There is nothing subjective or value-laden about it. It's mathematical. It creates clear, crisp lines. And in fact, in this subject application, applicants, professionals had no problem creating the setback line and showing where exactly it would go here. And then applicant tries to use that to say, well, that results in a house that's too small for their lot, and then that would be a taking. The fact that the setback is not desired does not make it not clear and objective. It does not make it a subjective value-laden standard like design review standards that says it has to conform to the nature of the neighborhood or improve the aesthetic design of the area. Those are the types of provisions that are commonly thrown out for being not clear and objective. Applicants also attack the process in their appeal. They say the process was not clear and objective and it resulted in unreasonable delay. The process in this case has been the same as any other appeal of a type 1 or type 2 decision in the city of Cannon Beach or in any other local jurisdiction. There is a staff decision, planning commission review, and opportunity to appeal to council. And in fact, both extensions of the time frame here have come from applicant requesting an appeal and additional review. Notwithstanding those appeals, I'll point out though that the final local decision is anticipated within 120 days of this application being complete. That's not an unreasonable delay. It's not an unreasonable timeframe. To the degree that this process has been more complex than usual or longer than applicant would have liked, I would just state that that comes from applicants not submitting clear application materials that address the approval criteria that the city has on its books and has had on its books for a long time. The last one of applicants' arguments that I want to touch on is their claim that there's a constitutional taking here, and that if the city applies its setback code, they've been deprived of all economic value. That's wrong for a number of reasons, as already documented in the staff reports and the records. I would just like to add that applicants have no reasonable expectation of development here. All of the development constraints that exist on the property today existed at the time when they first bought the property. They bought the property after the ocean shore setback existed. They bought the property after it was known to be on an active landslide. And all the several development constraints related to this property, including those two things, were noted in the public files for this property before applicant bought it. It explicitly notes the questionable buildability of this lot, and they went forward and acquired it anyway. That does not mean the city needs to somehow indemnify applicant for their gamble on this property. I'm going to pause right there for a second and just see if any council members have any specific questions about the ocean shore setback and what I've had to say on the applicant's appeal before I move briefly, and I'll try to get through briefly some of the reasons why we request additional grounds for denial on this application.
No questions.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned on the front end of this, there's a unique procedural posture in this case that has resulted in a lack of findings on some applicable approval criteria. This was originally an approval with conditions to meet certain criteria that had not yet been met, but it's now moved to a denial, both at staff recommendation and planning commission's unanimous decision. That has resulted in a gap of findings on some approval criteria. For example, there's supposed to be a tree plant that applicants are supposed to submit when they're doing a development like this and proposing to remove trees. That is not in the record. That's necessary to review and approve or consider this. As a result, there's a similar condition of approval about showing how the driveway will actually be accessed and what road will come in. That is obviously something that's still open, but we have a denial instead of an approval. As a result, it's appropriate in this context for the city to add findings on those particular approval criteria saying they're just not met yet. We respectfully ask that the city do that. First and foremost, where I'd encourage the city to kind of develop findings a little bit more is on the two public safety approval criterion at play here. And find that they're both not met. Both the ocean shore setback and CBMC chapter 17.42 talk about the unique hazards that exist on this site. 17.42 specifically relates to the fact that this is an active landslide, and 17.50 is that the 15 minutes?
That is the 15 minutes.
Okay, I'll wrap up. The most important component is to look at the safety issues at play on this site under the ocean shore setback and 17.50 regarding the active landslide. I'll provide a couple additional wrap-up thoughts on that in the remaining 5 minutes on the back end of public testimony. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you, Will. Let's see. Next name on my list is Don Radima.
For the proponents.
Yes, proponents.
Yeah.
Pardon?
The proponents.
Oh. Yeah.
And they'll get 5 minutes each.
Okay. Don, you get 5 minutes.
Thank you. This is Don Rondema, supporting Stan and Becky Roberts. My address is 20978 South Springwater Road, Estacada, Oregon, 97023. I wanted to just briefly kind of go over stability and safety, which have been brought up repeatedly. There's two conditions that we did our geotechnical analysis of stability on, primarily on tax lot 600. We did analysis to come up with a staggered grouted high-strength steel pile system across the front of the lot, which would increase the stability of the lot by 30%, which is more than an acceptable level of stabilization and is a safe condition. The other overall stability issue is the S-curves, which has been mentioned very many times. And this lot is a very small part of a larger slide mass. The ancient slide mass goes north 1,000 or more feet to Haystack Lane, down past the S-curves to the south, and one portion of it is more active than the rest, and that's referred to as the S-curves. We analyzed the S-curves starting in 1998, and I've been involved with it since. And we also reviewed the Nenana Avenue improvements and worked with that team to develop a system and an approach that did not appreciably reduce the stability of the S-curve slide for the roadway improvements. So I just wanted to clarify that the roadway improvements do not impact the safety and the equilibrium that we've already established with the horizontal drains in the system. I think the record and staff response also summarized that removal of 2 drains out of 19 in our testimony would not impact the overall stability of the slide because it was specifically designed to be a very redundant overlapping system to address those issues. And I guess lastly, I'd just like to say that, you know, a 30% increase in stability for tax lot 600 would also significantly improve stability of the lots immediately east of it, as well as the public right-of-way up on Hemlock. And that concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Ron. Don, sorry. Next is Chris Chennow.
Hello.
Yes, this is Chris Clemo. I'm going to turn on my video here. My business address is 1582 Fetters Loop, Eugene, Oregon, 97402. And as we've noted here, I'm speaking in favor of the Stan and Rebecca Roberts development. I also note that my firm and myself have submitted additional materials into the record today supporting the testimony here that I am giving tonight. You know, a significant issue here, and I'm speaking really to the development of Nenana Avenue and the intersection itself with Hemlock, so versus any of the other issues here. You know, and I guess a significant issue, which unfortunately all of you have become aware of, is, you know, how to provide public services to legal lots that in this case were created as part of a subdivision platted in the late 1800s. And, you know, that subdivision was platted without, you know, full consideration to topography, which is why all of these lots in that subdivision are square. And then additionally, the alignment of the old Coast Highway, which is now Hemlock Street, was constructed through the middle of that subdivision in a somewhat circuitous manner. So you've ended up with a lot of public roadways and intersections that have kind of sight distance related issues. From my perspective here, I just recognizing the difficulty in improving Nenana, which is a public roadway to the city standards to serve the Roberts property. I was hired to evaluate the sight distance issues at the Hemlock Nenana intersection. And as part of that effort, we worked with the city staff and the city's engineer to perform a sight distance analysis with the associated recommendations in that analysis. I should note that that particular analysis was done meeting the Cannon Beach Municipal Code standards, and it is based, or the standards which are based on the current AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials policy of geometric design of highways and streets. And those analysis materials are contained in two different technical documents in the public record identified as exhibits A10 and A12. And both of those studies have been reviewed and approved by the city, and the analysis methodology has been found to be accurate. Testimony contained in the Haystack Rock Appeal, which is exhibit A44 in your record, argues that the proposed Hemlock-Nenana intersection will be unsafe because use of the 85th percentile roadway speed is inappropriate when determining site distance measurements. In response, I again note that our analysis was prepared meeting city and AASHTO requirements, and specifically the appropriate roadway travel speeds for use in analysis are based on several factors. And for cases where speeds are affected by roadway geometry or topography, such as you have here on Hemlock, AASHTO recommends use of the 85th percentile roadway speed. It's the measured speed on the roadway. And I also note here kind of separately that while not yet adopted by AASHTO, there is even more current research performed by the National Cooperative Highway Research Program, which is NCHRP. And they've done that research specifically at AASHTO's request. And they have found that the 50th percentile roadway speed is more appropriate for use. And I should note that that speed is higher than the 85th percentile. And that the 50th percentile doesn't result in a statistical decrease in safety. But regardless of the appellant's argument, use of the 85th percentile speed is appropriate and will not result in an unsafe condition. I guess I should also note there are multiple existing intersections on Hemlock today with less available sight distance that do not have a documented safety deficiency. The other portion of the Haystack Rock Appeal is that what we have also noted in our analysis is that there is adequate sight distance for all movements except for the northbound left turn movement from Hemlock onto Nenana. And to address that, we recommend either restricting that movement via signing, and if that's not practical, allow the city to have the city consider allowing the applicant, the Roberts, to install a warning sign indicating a hidden driveway with supplemental flashing lights. Either way, the intersections anticipated operate safely and safer than other intersections along the same section of Hemlock. And those even include the ones at Gagona, I may mispronounce these, Gagona, Nazina, and Vista Del Mar. And there's also another unnamed driveway on Hemlock just north of Vista Del Mar. And all of those have less sight distance available than what we will have at Hemlock and Nenana. We also, to address some of these sight distance deficiencies, recommend the city consider installation of warning signs on northbound Hemlock, which is a reverse turn with an additional tick mark identifying the Nenana intersection. The materials I've submitted into the record show that sign. It's also an ODOT recommended practice, and in our discussions with ODOT staff, they suggested that that be done here. So I guess as part of that, I would argue that the city should consider installation of these signs at other locations on Hemlock. That said, that's the end of my testimony, and I'll turn it back.
Thank you. Next name is Jay. Jay Raskin. Hi, Jay. Long
Hello.
time since we've been in a meeting together.
It has been a while. I'll go through the process. I'm Jay Raskin, the architect who designed the house for the Roberts, and speak as a proponent for the project. My address is 2418 Southwest Troy Street, Portland, Oregon, 97219. I want to assure the council that the house was designed with what we understood were the city's setback requirements. Early on in the design, I had looked back through my records and saw that oceanfront averaging hadn't been required for 2 remodel addition projects I had designed on the presidential streets and assumed that this was due to their fronting Ocean Avenue, as is the case with the Roberts House. We had met with city staff and thought this had been confirmed. It was a bit of a surprise to find out differently at the time of the permit. I also want to speak to the design constraints that oceanfront setbacks present in designing a house on the site. First of all, the oceanfront average of 109 feet translates into an ocean yard setback of a bit over 75.5 feet. This reduces the setback, required setback to less than 40% of the lot's depth, which under the city's setback ordinance does allow for a setback reduction. Unfortunately, this reduction is only for the yard opposite the ocean. Since the Roberts property is a corner lot, this rear yard setback is only 5 feet, so there's really no room to have an increased setback when the city's minimum residential setback is 5 feet. This leaves an area of about 700 square feet, which can be built on. But we lose area to off-street parking of about 65 square feet since we need 2 parking spaces. The city requires an 18-foot depth for parking spaces. The setback on the non is 15 feet. So we're cutting back in the buildable area of about 3 feet. We can't park anywhere else on the property since the city's required roadway access comes in at the second floor level. Squaring up the irregular outline of the buildable area takes up to 150 square feet of the buildable area, which further reduces the area to about 485 square feet. Even when one doubles it to get a 2-story house, its size is closer to a mother-in-law unit than the 3,000 to 4,000 square foot houses that are coming in for permit in Cannon Beach. And the Roberts we're only requesting 2,728 square feet for their house, which puts it underneath the typical permit. The Roberts, while 2-story houses double the space, they are less efficient space-wise than a 1-story house, especially for small homes. Stairs and an extra bathroom take up space and have code requirements that make them inflexible elements, which makes it more difficult to design for. The Roberts also would like a house with some charm that isn't some dumb box seeking every square inch, and this cuts into the area that can be devoted to the house. Finally, I want to point out that the Roberts house has sparked a lot of emotion, and I would urge the council to look past it and judge the appeal on its merits. Staff has done a good job pointing out the code issues that are truly relevant. In my experience with the Roberts, they have bent over backwards to meet city requirements and have been willing to do what's best. The site stability proposed not only protects their house, but the cities and neighboring properties as well. And finally, I would like to correct the record item A that talks about the 2 homes I mentioned earlier in my testimony. These were built indeed before the 1994 but the renovation projects I was talking about were both permitted in 2003 when Oceanfront Ordinance was in effect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam got muted. Hold on. Where's?
Okay. Okay, sorry. That moves us to the next section, which is the opponents, presentations by opponents. First name I have is John Newport.
Good evening, council members and Mr. Mayor. My name is John Newport. I'm a member of Haystack Rock LLC. My address is 111 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 3400, Portland, Oregon, 97204. This evening, I want to address one of the arguments that the applicant makes that exemplifies their whole approach to this proposed development. And that is the notion that Ocean Avenue is a buildable lot. I'll explain in a moment why that's just plain wrong. But it does demonstrate the lengths to which the applicants are willing to go in their effort to persuade you and the public that this development is a good idea and complies with the city code. The reality is this whole proposed development, the proposed house serviced by a private elevated driveway in a right-of-way dedicated to the public, and that intersects Hemlock and the dangerous S-curves, is basically the equivalent of trying to pound a square peg into a round hole. The applicants should recognize that. The city should recognize that. But I'm concerned that the city does not, given that it is even entertaining the idea of a private and elevated flying bridge in undeveloped Nenana. But the city did get it right on the oceanfront setback rule. The statute that the applicants say makes this Ocean Avenue a buildable unit of land was enacted in 2019. And their argument is wrong for at least 3 reasons. The statute by its terms applies only to, quote, real property of the state, counties, and cities, close quote. Ocean Avenue is none of those things because there is no basis for the city to claim that it owns Ocean Avenue. The 1908 Warren Plat states that it was dedicated to the public for use as thoroughfares forever in the streets and avenues therein. A dedication for a thoroughfare and streets and avenues is not for housing. If the city tried to change this dedicated purpose, the public and the successors of the Warren Plat could sue the city to prevent the conversion. And incidentally, that same concept applies to undeveloped Nenana. Nenana and the abutting property owners, which include Haystack Rock LLC and includes the city because of Inspiration Point, both the city and Haystack have a property interest in seeing that Nenana is used only as a thoroughfare forever, not for a private elevated driveway that services one house. And as a thoroughfare, everybody seems to assume it must be for vehicular access. I don't know why people assume that, because when this was platted in 1908, motor vehicles were not in common usage. Second, if the statute applied, it only removes, quote, any land use regulation, comprehensive plan, or statewide land use planning goal, close quote, that restricts housing development. The statute does not and cannot remove the real estate restrictions that are reflected in the Warren Plat dedication. And finally, Ocean Avenue is basically the beach, and it's obvious that housing can't be built on the beach. In conclusion, the resources of Cannon Beach should not be devoted to trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. The ocean setback rule should be applied to this application. And if the applicant wants to persist in their efforts, something that I consider futile given all the challenges, they must comply with all the rules. And I want to comment here on a couple of things that Mr. Roberts said, that all of these problems could be solved if Haystack Rock granted him an easement, or if Haystack Rock sold him a couple of parcels of property. No trees would have to be removed and everybody could be happy. The council should also be aware that Haystack Rock has proposed to Mr. Roberts to purchase his property for what he paid for it, about $185,000. Nobody can buy an oceanfront lot that's buildable for $185,000. And we proposed purchasing it. We haven't heard back from Mr. Roberts on that, but that would solve this problem too. And it would also provide the possibility of Haystack Rock enhancing Inspiration Point, something that is important to the city. So those are my remarks. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Next on my list is Jan Sievert. Jan? Saw her number.
Working on it.
Hello.
There we go, Jan.
So I'm Jan Siebert Warmond, P.O. Box 778, Cannon Beach, Oregon 97110. Dear Cannon Beach Mayor and City Councilors, this letter is to encourage you all to help maintain our Cannon Beach standards by upholding our Cannon Beach Planning Commission's decision to deny the Roberts appeal. As I understand the situation, the city staff report indicates that the city did get survey information from the Roberts revealing that their new house, as proposed, does not meet our Cannon Beach oceanfront setback requirements. Failure to meet these requirements necessitates the denial of the Roberts appeal. For the health, safety, and livability of our community and its environment, please deny the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And now, last on my list is Kevin Newport. Kevin? Let's get you unmuted.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay, thanks. My name is Kevin Newport. My address is 4332 Southwest Summer Way, Portland, Oregon, 97221. I am one of the owners of Haystack Rock LLC, which owns and maintains the historic Oswald West Cabin. I am speaking on my own behalf tonight. The Newport family, who owns Oswald West Cabin, and our neighbors have been good stewards of the special place for my entire life. It's about 52 years. Allowing the proposed development would be tragic for our neighborhood and Cannon Beach. As you have seen, over 50 people provided oral and written testimony opposing this proposal. We respectfully ask the council to deny this proposal. We worked with the city and other community members to acquire Inspiration Point on the south side of Nenana to preserve the natural characteristics of the hillside. We've been dedicated to preserving the historical Oswald West Cabin. When the cabin burned down, we rebuilt it to the National Register standards. The National Register of Historic Places emphasizes the significance of the natural setting around the Oswald West Cabin, including the Roberts property. It says, in quotes, "It is clear that inspiration for the means by which further sale of Oregon tidelands to private ownership could be blocked had come to Governor West while he occupied his own summer retreat on what was then an uninhabited shoreline. Others would soon discover the wonders of Oregon coast. When West bought the property from Mark S. and Edna Warren on September 5th, 1911, he had his choice of the entire coast. This site, still intact for the most part, is dramatic and is made more so by the parcel of the undeveloped land adjacent to the southwest corner of the holdings. The hope is to preserve the most compelling part of the coastline that serves as West's inspiration and thereby to commemorate his far-reaching conservation initiatives. Next, stripping the hillside and replacing it with a view of an underside of a road 25 feet in the air is just not okay. Trees don't grow west of where this elevated road is proposed. If the city allows it to be built, that is what you'll be looking at up from the beach. We also have been good partners with the city over the years in helping them stabilize the S-curves. We've never had movement under the cabin, and it is outside of the mapped active land side that impacts the S-curves and the Roberts site. Nevertheless, we agreed to let the city use our property for dewatering efforts to stabilize the S-curves. We don't want the city to use that goodwill project against us. We don't ask for special treatment. We just respectfully request the city council to apply its rules the way they are written, including the oceanfront setback and others, to deny this application. Thank you for your time and consideration tonight.
Okay, thank you. That concludes that part. So we're going to go back to the, I guess it's a rebuttal phase.
That's correct. 5 minutes from the LLC's attorney, Haystack Rock LLC, and then the applicant's attorney gets the final 5 minutes.
Okay, that would be 5 minutes from Will, and then we'll go to Wendy.
That's
So we'll
correct.
start with Will.
Okay, I'm going to shut down my video. I understand I wasn't coming across clearly before. Hopefully that will help. I want to start off with what applicants hit on, which was a whole bunch of things that didn't explain how the city could ignore its oceanfront setback standard. This is an oceanfront lot. That should be clear at this point. Ocean Avenue is not a buildable lot. That's equally clear at this point. As a result, the oceanfront setback rule applies as staff decided and as the Planning Commission unanimously decided. There is no basis to just ignore this longstanding city rule. And in fact, it would be wrongful and unlawful for the city to ignore this rule on its books. Second, I want to touch a little bit on the dewatering pipes that Mr. Rondema spoke about, and that's kind of at the core of some of the safety issues at play here. The fundamental problem with applicants' approach to those pipes is that they assume they can maintain those pipes. There's 19 pipes that go under this property and abutting properties that stabilize the S-curves. Applicant proposes to drill a bunch of pilings or beams down through unimproved Nenana and through the subject site that could damage those pipes and that could render them unusable. And in fact, the applicant's own geotechs say that those pipes should be maintained and say that if pipes get disturbed, they potentially should be replaced. They don't have a right to do that. The city has a right to do that because of the good faith of the Newport family and the other abutting owners that have signed either temporary or permanent easements to allow the city to maintain those pipes under private property. It would be wrong for the city to then use those pipes and say, well, if they get damaged or whatever, we're going to use those pipes to enable this very contentious development. The purpose of those pipes was not to facilitate private development. If they do get damaged, if the drilling does damage them, or if anything else does damage them, if it's not the drilling, if it's just private acts, or if it's just wear and tear of time, the Robertses do not have a right to maintain them. All they have is the right to go under their own property and do what they can there. And the materials in this record uniformly shows that the dewatering system that lowers the groundwater there stabilizes the entire hillside. This is a safety issue for the Robertses and the S-curves and my client's property. The last thing I want to just mention is, as everybody has said, applicants and the Newports, this is a highly contentious proposal. And the applicants asked the city to ignore its oceanfront setback rule in this highly contentious setup. And there's just no legal basis to do that. If you did, you would have a bigger problem from all the opponents that are concerned about this, that want the city to follow its own rules. And we just ask you to follow the oceanfront setback rule as it's written in chapter 17.42, as it's been applied to everybody else, including my client's property and every other property that's oceanfront Cannon Beach. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Thank you, Will. Moving on to Wendy Kellington.
Thank you. Wendy Kellington here for the Roberts. I think my job in my 5 minutes is to tell you the truth, because you've been sold a bunch of falsehoods, and I know you don't want to make a decision on that basis. The first one is that there's something about the Roberts proposal that has anything to do with the city's dewatering system. It does not. There's not one dewatering pipe under the Roberts property. In fact, the only evidence in the record, as the opponents well know, is that the Roberts proposal actually stabilizes the landslide by an additional 30%. The second thing is you've been misled about what the legal standard is. The Court of Appeals, and I won't quote a bunch of cases, but the Court of Appeals says a standard isn't clear and objective if it can plausibly be interpreted in more than one way. If so, it's ambiguous and it's not clear and objective. This drivel that you've been sold, that standards only fail the clear and objective standard if they have a value-laden analysis, is simply a falsehood. The Oregon coordinate line, you were told why you just go to a statute and there it is, lickety split. The truth is there is no statute, no ordinance, no nothing that uses the term Oregon coordinate line. What there is a statutory vegetation line and a line of established vegetation. It's ambiguous which you choose. The standard is not clear and objective. And talk about who wants to ignore laws. Mr. Newport took issue with the legislature in 2019 overriding the Oregon Planning Association and the city of Corvallis and the League of Oregon Cities that complained that their new statute that made public land available for housing, why it would violate dedications, why it would allow the development of right-of-way. And you know what the legislature did? They adopted the statute. That's not me. That's the Oregon legislature. And I'm sure the opponents have an army of lawyers prepared to sue the legislature because every time we turn around, we hear about them threatening to sue somebody or take away their landslide stability piping. But the point is the legislature makes Ocean Avenue available for housing. Finally, I want to say that the opponents make a statement why we should just sell our property back for what we paid for it. Well, first of all, they don't tell you the truth about what we paid for it. We paid quite a bit more than what they said. But number two, what they don't get, or maybe they do, but I hope you do, is that the Roberts want to live on this property. They've owned it for 20 years. They're ready to retire. They love it. They love the city. They want to be a part of your community. And they hope that you will approve their home because you know what? You can and should do so based on the interpretation and application of your own code and state law. You don't have to ignore anything. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. I guess we go now to staff response. Bill?
So I guess I'll jump in here and just make sure I understand that you're closing the public hearing portion and moving on to deliberations is my understanding of the next step. And I had a conversation with Jeff today and he can fill in if I got it wrong. But since this has been such contentious issues and we expect it to go to LUBA, typically we'd ask you to make a formal motion and approval. And what we think might work better is that we get some tentative discussion from you about the issues and how you'd like to decide them. And then we bring back a set of findings for you in about a week or so for you to review and either sign off on or to tell us what you'd like fixed, and we can fix those findings. Instead of trying to craft a lengthy motion for approval or denial or something, give us direction about what you want to see and we can fill it out and bring it back to you. Jeff, did that capture what we were discussing earlier?
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Oh, I like that approach. Okay.
Okay, then, so Jeff, do you have anything you want to add to the comments that were made, or shall I go directly to consideration?
No, unless you guys have any questions, I have nothing else.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing and then we'll move for consideration. Council, how do you wish to feel?
Speak at once.
They always wait for me.
Come on, Mike, go ahead.
I'm not going to this time. I guess I have a comment. Not sure you can hear me muffled like this. I thought we're here to hear an appeal to the Planning Commission's ruling opposing the application on the basis of the ocean setback requirement. And I've heard several hours of testimony about roads, and building sizes, and trees, and safety issues, and dewatering, which seems totally irrelevant to me in addressing the hearing that we have here before us. So I spent a lot of time trying to separate and sort out what was relevant to this hearing versus the applicants and the opponents making cases for something that is not yet before us, or even before the development officer. So with that out of the way, I feel I've heard nothing that would cause me to do anything other than support the Planning Commission's ruling and therefore deny the applicant's appeals. Open for discussion. That's from my view.
I agree with you, Mike.
So do I.
The whole discussion about the setback and Ocean Avenue falls to me. I will come back in. I kind of agree with Mike. There was a lot of extraneous points that this problem is larger than just one little tidbit, but it just happens to be one little tidbit that we're focused on right at the moment. All the other points they're not valid to this discussion, but they're valid to the concerns that people have about this development. So in that case, it is a filtering that we have to do to try and figure out what we're confronted with. I was taken by the fact that some of the discussion that we've had about other projects around town that involve street right away, and the fact that Ocean just happens to be platted on this impossible place to build. Even if we wanted a road there, it wouldn't be viable as a road. It's just, and the whole concept of it being potential housing or any other sort of buildable lot just doesn't work, because streets are not, they're not lots. They're not lots that can be used. They are held by the city in ownership for the community's use. We just cannot give that up. We can't sell them. We could abandon them where the party gets halves and stuff like that, but it's just not ours to use to develop. So that alone to me solves the setback issue of what is a frontage. in places where that might have happened before, that happens because of other circumstances. So I don't see a precedent there. So in that sense, I am in agreement with what Mike was saying, and I would support the Planning Commission.
Just as an observation, and I'm not making a recommendation here, it seems that there was a potential remedy that was pointed out, remedy for the Roberts, and that was to go before the Planning Commission and seek a variance to their setback requirement. I've seen no indication that they're intending to do that or perhaps even willing to do that. I don't know, maybe Jeff, you have some comment on that, but it's standing out there and they've not addressed it.
Yeah, it's, it is in the exhibits, that was in both letters that I wrote them in completeness, so.
Okay, just a curiosity. Well, I haven't heard from Brandon.
Well, what I support is them being able to develop their property if they met the oceanfront setback line. And that's not what's before us. And so I'm left with, I support the decision that the Planning Commission made at this point. If they want to submit something that comports with the oceanfront setback line, then that's different.
Okay, Jeff, I guess that's the guidance you've got.
All right, thank you.
Don't we need a motion?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Bill, should we make a motion at this point, Bill, or?
Unless we hear something, that from one of the commissioners who expresses some concern, I don't think we need official motion. I think we've got direction from a majority of the council that you want to support the Planning Commission's decision. And so what we'd like to do is go back and, tweak some of the Planning Commission's findings in light of the discussion that you had tonight, as well as some of the arguments that were made to sort of make it a little more, to flesh out some of those things. But basically, it's what the Planning Commission said, and we'll bring those findings back to you in the future. And I'd have to look to Jeff and Bruce as to what makes sense when the next session is, and have you review those findings, and then the official motion would be at that meeting.
Yeah. So Sam, we have it set for the 14th.
It should work.
And at what time?
The meeting on the 14th is at 6 p.m. So do you guys want to do this at the beginning or do a separate meeting first to not debate that time? What's your?
Well, I think the record Bruce saying that as city manager, I think there's actually 3 dates that are potential for next week. We have the retreat on the 15th and the 17th. Both of those go to 4 o'clock. Potentially we could do it from 4 o'clock on. Or if we were going to do the meeting on the 14th, that's the day of the Cannon Beach Elementary discussion, that starts at 6. My preference would be that we don't interrupt that meeting. We have our meeting start at 5 for the continuation of whatever we call it. So I think that those are the 3 days after 4, after the retreat, 15th and 17th, or start recommendations to start at 5 if we do it on 14th.
I'd prefer the 14th at 5. We do have a 120-day cutoff, don't we, Jeff?
Yes, well,
Yeah, the 120 days is an interesting question, but the 120-day period runs up in, I believe, August 23rd or 24th or so. And just in terms of, regardless of whether it's subject to the 120 days, it's probably good practice to make that decision within that time period. And so, we prefer it to be sooner rather than later.
My sense of this is it's not a lengthy discussion. I think we've had that. We've heard everybody. My understanding by hearing what the council has to say is that I think we're there. I would say the 14th. Put it on the first thing. We'll get her done, and then we can go into a nice leisurely conversation about the school.
The 14th? You mean the 15th?
14.
14th is Cannon Beach Elementary, and recommend you start at 5 for this meeting. So that meeting can start at 6, and that's when everybody expects to be talking about the school.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, we'll get those findings to you as soon as we can get them drafted, so you'll have plenty of time to review them before that meeting.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think that it finishes that part for now. Let me go back to this. Let me do this. Okay, the next item is our next appeal. The Najimi appeal 2001, Planning Commission decision to reverse an administrative decision to issue a building development permit for a new residence. Jeff, remind us of this one.
Right, this is the by Mr. Alterman on behalf of Mr. Najimi of the Planning Commission's approval of the administrative appeal of Mr. and Ms. Harrison, city administrative approval to issue a development permit to build a new single-family residence. And the property's located at 544 North Laurel Street, tax lot 7,000, map 51019 AD, and Cannon Beach Preservation Subdivision Plan Development in the residential medium density R2 zoning district, confirming the Planning Commission's decision and adopting findings. At the last hearing, which was last week, I was tasked with drafting up some findings. You guys closed the record and you wanted me to complete that record. I did that. We posted everything thanks to Jen. And then I drafted up these draft findings for your review. And hopefully I'll just briefly go through them real quick, and then you guys can let me know if we need to touch on anything. And we can always do the same with this one, where if you guys aren't satisfied with what we have here, I can redraft them, and then we can finalize them at the next one. And so on page one, I discussed the exceptions to the building height regulations and the turret, and found that the city council finds the turret is not of ornamental or utilitarian character, containing windows, although not providing direct access, accessible through ladder access, which could possibly be used as an observation deck, not in keeping with the intent of the municipal code. City council specifically interprets the list of uses allowed to exceed the height limit to involve decorative or functional projections, but not the ones that allows persons to spend extended periods of time in them. The applicant asserts that the turret would be more in the nature of a storage area, but a storage area such as an attic or a loft would also allow persons to spend extended periods of time in it. Each of the examples in the list, 17, 90, 80, would not allow a person to spend an extended period of time in it. Accordingly, the council concludes that the turret as proposed does not meet the terms of the exception in Cannon Beach Municipal Code 1790-80. And then I turn to the common outdoor living area. The city council finds that although the plan development chapter 1740 does not define common outdoor living area, the intent is not to have driveways as part of the common outdoor living area. The council finds that at least 7,500 square feet of the 25,000 planned development area must be provided as common shared open space. If the driveway easements are removed from the calculations, which were provided in exhibits C6 through 8, the plan development has provided only 5,138 approximately of common shared open space. Until the homeowners association can provide the 2,362 additional square feet of common shared open space, each owner provides 591 square feet of common shared open space through an easement benefiting all owners of the planned development. The city will not approve a building permit for any properties of the Cannon Beach Preservation Plan Development Subdivision. Then turning to the maximum habitable space footage, plan development approval required that the total habitable space for the entire plan development may not exceed 9,000 square feet, and the Genie Lot 1 shall not exceed 3,090. The council finds that the floor area ratio worksheet shows the total square footage for the home proposed in the application equals to 3,090. However, this square footage calculation did not include the habitable square footage from the Harding garage on the parking easement of Lot 1. The council does not support the Cannon Beach official and community development director's opinion that the storage loft area, although not accessible by stairs, isn't to be considered similar to a sleeping loft and thus to be included in the habitable space calculation, bringing the total for Lot 1 to 3,300 square feet. City Council specifically notes that condition number 3 of the decision approving the plan development requires that sleeping lofts, detached accessory sleeping quarters, fully enclosed sunrooms and hallways are habitable space, as opposed to the unfinished attics, crawl spaces, storage areas, and similar spaces, which are deemed uninhabitable. In this case, the City Council notes that the loft area in the garage is fully enclosed and the structure contains a full bathroom as well as a furnace and other accoutrements that the council considers to be more consistent with including the area in the calculation of habitable space. City Council finds that until the Genie revised floor plans to meet the 3,090, the city cannot approve a building permit. And then if you'll note over on the conclusions, I left the conclusion blank. So if you guys have thoughts this evening, then I can write that in if you have anything else. And so any questions or thoughts, and I'm happy to amend these as you would like.
Actually, Jeff, I thought that was a very well-written finding, so I'm good.
I do too. I thought that was very clear and succinct and to the point.
I guess my only concern is that I feel maybe the whole space should be counted, which would be 630 square feet, because there is a heated floor and the shower toilet are downstairs. So I guess that's my only contribution to that, is that I almost feel the whole building itself is livable space, if the loft is.
Are you referring to the garage, Robin?
Have you seen a car parked in the garage?
A lot of people have garages that are cars.
My car has never.
And does your garage have a heated floor?
Has a heater.
Anyway, it's just up
But I
for,
don't think that was an issue that the planning commission brought up as part of their
okay.
denial. And we're looking at the appeal of the planning commission, or, yeah, not an appeal of it, but confirming it.
The denial, yeah.
So anyway, I thought it was a good summary statement of the position that, as I understood it.
Yeah, I think you brought up all of the issues that we discussed.
Do you need anything else you under the conclusion, or I can just take that out?
Is there anything about the wall that could also be added into
I
that?
don't think it's part of the, that wasn't part of the appeal.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're sticking to the appeal of the planning commission. Well, I would offered before, not hearing anything more, I would make a motion, having considered the evidence in the record and upon motion to deny, let me get this right, to,
Uphold?
yeah, to uphold the planning commission order or ruling. This one says things backwards. So deny the appeal of the planning commission's, yes, order. Yeah,
Does that do what you really wanted?
so I'm trying to.
I'm not sure that's correct, Mike. The appeal is,
I got backwards.
Should we just support
the appeal?
planning commission?
Yeah. Yeah, the motion is to uphold the planning commission's. Yeah, so deny the motion to appeal. And deny the motion to appeal their order.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to deny the appeal, seconded. Any last comments? Okay, Jennifer?
Council President Benefield,
Yes.
Councilor Risley,
Yes.
Councilor Ogilvy,
yes.
Councilor McCarthy,
Yes.
Mayor Stidell.
Yes. There you go, Jeff.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bring the findings back or we good?
We're good.
Okay.
Can we take a break? 5-minute break?
Sure, if you need to. I gotta figure out where I am anyhow.
Yeah, let's stand up.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, thank you. See you next week.
All right, thank you. Two meetings a month, I was told.
Did Daryl Johnson ever show up?
Yeah.
I don't see him on that list and I haven't seen him attached.
Okay.
Rusty, have you muted everybody while we're on break?
I did, and then I unmuted to talk to Sam.
Sorry. Okay, we all back?
Yeah, I think we're ready to go, Sam.
Okay. Next item, I believe, is motions and seconds. Bruce?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had an interesting situation in one of our Public Works Committee meetings. There were 3 people there, including the chair. One person was strongly in favor of a particular subject. The other one was strongly against. Neither one could make a motion. There was nobody to second. And it wasn't clear if whether or not the chair could either make a motion or second. So what we're recommending is that, and I'm not sure if this goes into a rule someplace or whatever, but that we do allow the chairs to be able to make motions or seconds, because our priority, in my opinion, is to conduct the business, and as opposed to trying to maintain order, like if you're dealing with a parliament or something. So that would be my recommendation. In this case, it was not resolved. So I don't know.
Not too long ago, Tammy at the time and I, we went through a lot of stuff because there was some discussion about that at council level. It was my understanding, and as far as I understood, it was in the rule book, you might say, that the chair could make a motion, but generally would not. It was their choice. They can second it. So I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I'm comfortable with that as long as the chair people understand that it's not generally their practice to do that. Their job is to maintain the meeting and let other folks make the motions, except for those kinds of situations that pop up. So.
Yeah, Sam, I agree. I totally agree with that. And the intent was for this to come into play if no one else was making motion, seconds, that sort of thing, to keep things moving, but not that the chair becomes actively involved with making motions in seconds.
How many people are on the Public Works Committee right now?
Right now, there's 3 or 4.
How many people are on the committee right now?
Currently, there are 4 people. We have 1 vacancy, and there were only 3 people in attendance at the meeting.
Okay. And could that 4th person have attended the meeting via Zoom or something like that? Or do you do that with that group?
The person had a personal emergency that day, so they weren't able to attend. That's why we just had 3 people.
And Robin, all of our committees are meeting via Zoom.
Okay.
I'd like to kind of follow the traditional practice of the chair sitting back and conducting the meeting and not making a motion or seconding, except when there is a tie that can't be resolved. I don't think they doing it for letting them do it anytime, I think would be an error. There are times that somebody makes a motion and there are no seconds. I don't think it's appropriate for the chairman to then second that. If there's a tie vote, it's like the vice president comes in and resolves the tie vote.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. It's not, and we will word it in such a way that it's I think it's what you might call it if you're stymied, if the group is not able to make any decisions. And there might be times when it's okay to go ahead and let it go because nobody wants to make a motion or something. But in this case, it was somebody appealing a water bill. And just to say, well, we didn't have enough people and nobody could make a motion, so you got denied. It's to try to, we will bring you something that words it in that way so that it's to take care of that situation. And not that if somebody doesn't second the motion, it fails. Not if they don't second the motion, I'll second it because I liked it.
I agree with Mike. I don't think that the chair should be making the motion. I think that they could possibly vote one way or the other, but not to be leading the discussion. That seems to be against what we're hoping an objective chair would do.
There's an issue, there's another situation that has come up in the past where nobody makes a motion.
Then doesn't it die?
When you have a situation where you're required to make a decision, you need some sort of decision.
Yeah.
So that becomes quite awkward, and quite often a motion is necessary just to say no. And a lot of people don't want to do that. So that becomes another type of issue that comes up. The fact that what Tammy came up with is when we were trying to figure this out, some time ago, if you have the right to vote, you should have the right to make a motion. So yes, the chairman is there to maintain the meeting, but they're also a voting person. In the situation, and there's a lot of cities in Oregon that have non-voting chairmen. That's their job, is just to be the chairman. So they don't vote unless there is a tie. That's the only time. So we don't have that situation. We've never run into that situation, especially in the committees. So I think all what we need to do is just train folks better on what happens when you have a situation like what came up at the Planning Commission. Theoretically, if you have one motion, no second, you have a second motion, no second, that means you find a middle ground and make a third motion until you get a consensus. If it was an appeal, like Karen was saying, that it's either a yes or no, kind of hard to have a middle ground. So it becomes a challenge.
And my concern in this case was just that somebody had appealed a fine, or not a fine, but a bill, and we weren't even able to get to the point of a vote. So failed because of parliamentary things as opposed to, was it just or not?
Yeah, I suppose part of the role of the chair is to move that meeting along and get decisions. And can't do that without stepping in. It seems appropriate for them to step in and make the vote, or God, I would think if nobody wants to make a motion, there's something wrong.
Yeah, and what it was the chair set that, and the other two were very strongly separated on the item.
Pretty easy to say the chair should go ahead and vote.
What about, to your point and to Robin's point, what if the chair can't make a motion, but the chair can second?
Right.
Had either one of them made a motion, you could have done it, there would have been a vote up or down. But to me, we should have had that vote. So what if they can just make a second?
I would feel more comfortable with that.
That okay? Sam, does that make sense to you and Brandon?
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
I would also ask that you yourself, Bruce, maybe put your foot down, and if a motion truly is needed to remind the committee that it's their job to do just that.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and we do try to do that as staff, but again, it was just the dynamics of that particular issue. It was hard, and nobody could say yes, the chair can second or make a motion. That's what we're trying to clarify. So I think the next time we'll be able to do a better job.
Yeah, in that situation, if the chair could second, then either one of those parties could have made a motion for their view, and it could be seconded. And then in that case, the chair would also have to vote.
Right, and they do. And it would have been, then we would have had an up or down.
Right.
That's all we're looking for. Okay, so we'll bring you back, if with that consensus, bring you back something that says that the chair can second. Okay, and if there is no motion, then
that doesn't help that situation, but that's okay.
I'm not comfortable without allowing the chair to make a motion because I think that's a right of the person that gets to vote. So
Okay,
I think the chairs should all be trained to avoid it where necessary, but I still think it's a right.
Should we vote on this?
Concern is the chair, you get a strong chair and they're not only running the meeting, they're making all the motions and they're.
Well, if you have language in there that says only when there's a tie vote or nothing can be done.
Yeah,
You know, if you restrict it strong enough so that the chair makes a motion only in those cases and not on an arbitrary basis. I think
you can craft something like that.
we'll work on something like that, but we understand the point that you don't want the chair to.
run the whole thing. Yeah.
We do want, again, other than something having to do with an appeal from somebody, I don't care if that happens or not, because that's normal parliamentary procedure. Okay. All right, thank you. We'll bring something.
Okay, something. Next one, Warren Way, Karen.
Okay. So the staff report you have in front of you tonight on the Warren Way intersection is a follow-up to the November 11th work session where council had asked me to come back to you with a proposed conceptual drawing of that intersection that would include a four-way stop, the extension of the landscaping to remove the temporary candlesticks that we have discussed for a while. And so that's what's before you tonight. But what is in addition to that is the news that we applied for the small city allotment, and we were granted $100,000, the full amount that was asked for. So that is on the table for you to be aware of when you're looking at this conceptual drawing. It adds 2 additional stop signs, making this a four-way stop, as we discussed in the work session. It also adds a turning lane at the
Westbound?
Yes, the wayside east, northeast corner. So not to back traffic up onto the highway, which is what we're experiencing at the Sunset Pelican intersection. So we added that turning lane. There is room for that, and it will mitigate that backup of traffic to the highway. So I wanted to point that out to you as well. And again, the extension of the landscape, which would remove the temporary candlesticks. This is a conceptual drawing, but it does follow the ADA requirements of us adding the ramp identified in the drawing. The other 2 corners already have ADA ramps. So it does meet the ADA requirements for us to do this. The budget, I'd like to point out to you that has a 15% contingency. There was a line item 24 that talks about the plant establishment care for 1 year. That's an optional item that I have crossed out. Taliban Inn has agreed to maintain water and care for that landscaping if we put this in. So that's been a mutual partnership between the Taliban Inn and their homeowners association there, that they will care for that if the city sees this through.
for just 1 year or
I'm sorry, say again?
for just 1 year or
No.
permanently?
Yes.
That is very generous. Wonderful.
Very. They've been involved in the conceptual drawing so that we know that they're pleased with how this would look. The wild card on this, what we weren't sure about was the ADA requirements and sidewalk requirement, which they were concerned about the expense of that. And us getting the small business allotment has definitely helped with that concern.
Great, congratulations.
I think it's been-
Yeah, this is another example, and Jen was heavily involved with this. But Jennifer and Karen doing a great job helping us from a financial standpoint to do our infrastructure. Very proud of them. Good job.
Thank you.
Jen has been chasing all money that
Yeah.
was able to nail down, so she gets all the credit.
That's her new title. That's her new title, the chaser of all money.
She's the chaser of the funds, and she's teaching Kelsey bells.
Yes.
Questions on the design as we have it laid out, or proposal that's out, anything I can answer for you regarding what's in front of you tonight?
How does this fit in with the TSP?
Good question. So this four-way stop was proposed in the Lancaster traffic study that was done many years ago. They came back and did a follow-up study to prove the candlestick design was effective. They gave you that presentation in the work session. The current TSP that is pending is not, they just completed it, just got it in mine and Jeff's hands. We asked for a reevaluation of this intersection. Jeff and I, neither one have had a chance to really get in there and dissect what they have done because they just delivered it to us. We've been a little bit busy with these other appeals. And so I will look at that and make sure that there's nothing that we have here that would be in conflict. We talked to them about this intersection. I specifically asked them to look at it, give us a second opinion, if you will. And they reviewed what Lancaster had done and had that in mind when they reassessed this. So before I would bring this back to you for a formal action to me, I would make sure that we have covered that, and I come back and let you know that.
Okay.
I don't expect this to be a problem, but I want to double check that.
So, Karen, is it fair to say that the next step will be that we come back to another workshop with the TSP engineers statement on this, and then we can finalize the additional funding source?
We do have a deadline on signing the grant, though.
Sorry, say again?
We do have a deadline to sign the grant.
What is that?
I want to say 60 days, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But
Okay.
we do have a time frame on that. I can peek at my email real quick.
Yeah, we do. It is 60 days, so we would have to get it in front of them over this next 7 meetings.
Okay.
Oh, what's the action we need here?
The action tonight would basically give me a tentative approval to proceed with the discussion with the TSP folks that have our plan in front of us now to make sure this is not in conflict. And that if it is not, that you give us the approval to go forward on this.
We will bring it forward to their approval once we get that information.
Yeah.
So when you come back, you'll also tell us the source of additional funding.
Yes.
And there's probably no room to make any changes to the agreement. I expect that they're standard, but is there anything that gives you heartburn? It's going to make it difficult to address the requirements of the grant.
Not that I'm aware of at this point, and Jeff and I did verify with the TSP team that this grant would not be in conflict with anything that they may have proposed in their TSP plan to us. And he told Jeff today that if anything, it would be in concert with what they would propose us to do.
Okay. Good.
Just to touch on the budget as well, the $138,000 that was estimated and quoted in the staff report is from the engineering firm that gave us the conceptual drawing and what the next steps are to get the actual construction engineer document ready. As you'll see, the budget is not going to be as high as it's outlined because of the one line item that we removed for $7,000. I don't anticipate having to ask you for additional funds. I think between what's proposed here, estimated, what the grant is, and what I have in my budget this year, I think we can cover that. This obviously wouldn't start constructing until next year, so depending on what the budget committee does to me for next year, I may not be able to uphold that. But at this point, I think if we were to get started on this before my budget year ended, I feel that I have the rest of what I would need to do this.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Karen. Good job, folks.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Okay, next item is public input meeting schedule. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council asked us to set up 4 different dates, or to suggest 4 different dates. We tried to stretch it out a little bit more than we did the last time. So we've done it over 3 weeks. So it's January 6th, which is a Wednesday evening, Saturday the 16th at 10 a.m. And then the next 2 Wednesdays, which is the 20th and 27th, both at 5:30.
Well, I'm concerned that they're all Wednesday nights except for Saturday. So it doesn't seem to be too varied.
Okay, and what we were trying to avoid is the Tuesday night meetings for council, Thursday night meetings. We can try to go ahead and adjust, for example, the Wednesday the 6th. We could make that Thursday the 7th. Because I think that's a valid concern, Nancy. So we can make that minor adjustment if it makes sense.
5:30. That starts at 5:30 also.
Suggestions you would like, because the last meeting, we were able to get a lot of variations. We had more meetings.
Well, and didn't we do a Saturday meeting where we did a morning and a afternoon or evening?
We can adjust this by changing the dates, times, or adding meetings. But I thought we were trying to stay at 4.
Yeah.
I will have to have an objection to the 10 a.m. on Saturday. That runs into my needing to be here. I could do earlier, but I know a lot of other people couldn't. So that's just as a challenge. I might be able to make it work if it's brief and we started a little earlier. I don't know.
Oh, because of work?
Yeah.
And I don't have a sense of how many people we're going to hear from. That's why I have the suggestion that we're going to try to work on a sign-up system so that if somebody's going to present, we can tell Mike that he's going to present on the 7th at 6:20 or something, so that not everybody is waiting to talk on Zoom, unless he's trying to figure all that out, or maybe he can figure it out easily. But just try to make it so that people have a sense of when they're going to talk and get a little bit of better handle on how long the meetings are likely to run.
You know, if we could move one of these 5:30 meetings to, say, 7, that'd give those people that are just off work at 5:30 time to get home and Zoom in.
Okay.
How long are they gonna last? An hour or 2?
Probably.
I would say probably, well, I have no idea, because if somebody just says, hey, I think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, or I would recommend that we set up a room for something like this that could do Zumba, dancing, and all that. So I don't know, or if somebody has a whole different concept they want to present.
I guess the reason I'm asking is because the Saturday is the only one that really is different for people. So if we could have it a little earlier so that Sam could.
Earlier is fine with me, but I wonder if we shouldn't also have one a little later, as well, like around 4 o'clock or like that as well.
Have 2 that day?
Either that day or another Saturday. I mean,
That way people who are here for the weekend could come. Or
Let me add a couple other ideas. Now that I think about it, I could always, I mean, these are presentations that we will have on YouTube, so I could always go back and look at anything I miss. So that doesn't bother me. And the other thing is, if they all start at 5:30, they could go on till 7. I mean, that's just a start time. And that if people start coming in and saying, I can only make it at 7 o'clock, we'll just continue a meeting until 7. I think we're kind of running into the idea that we don't know who's going to be presenting, how many are going to be presenting. And if we're asking them to do a scheduled time slot, we'll have a clearer idea once people start giving us the time they want to come in. So if we're just saying we want to open the idea of starting at 5:30, but nobody wants to start at 5:30, they want to start at 6, that will just happen.
Except we'll be sitting here at 5:30 waiting.
Well, that's why if we set it up in advance, we can, we can modify the time or something.
You can always reschedule the meeting.
How are you going to, how are you going to set up the sign up system, do you think?
I'm not sure. I think, we start seeing how long the list is and then start for the first meeting unless somebody, and as a matter of fact, we can ask for a preference. So if somebody wants to be on Saturday at 9, we go ahead and we put them on
I guess
first.
my question is, how are they going to make that contact to tell you to
We'll
put them on the
have
list?
some sort of a form to fill out that we would work from. And, maybe that's going to be too complicated, but, usually we just have a bunch of people sitting here and they raise their hand or else they sign up when they come in there. And what my concern would be with, especially when we're doing Zoom, is that everybody would want to sign up for the first meeting.
Okay, my question is, are they going to contact City Hall and say they want to sign up? Or are you going to put something out to them and say, you need to sign up for? How do they make that initial contact?
We will ask people to let us know if they want to speak. And if they do, we'll send them something that will have some information on it so that we can try to match their preferences and to not have one meeting that has got all the presentations. But I'm saying, people might not be happy with that. Or we can just go and have people raise their electronic hands and we just do it in some sort of an order like that, but.
We could do it better if there would be a form online that they could fill out and then you could accumulate them.
That would be the intention.
Because it sounded like you needed to have them contact you first. But if we know when the times are, then people could request certain times and you could.
That works better. It does, that does work.
They'll have to wait to get a hold of you first.
Yeah. That can work better. And what we'll be doing is asking for a first and a second preference. Maybe.
For a time slot.
Yeah, for a time slot.
Are you still thinking about 2 times on Saturday?
I guess if people ask for, I would offer that and then see if people sign up.
How it works.
And how they respond to it.
Okay.
I think if we're going to do it, we need to put it on the list so people can take that as an option.
Right.
But like if there's 2 people, maybe we can contact them and say, hey, can you do it Monday night, Wednesday night, or something like that. I remember where I took away Thursdays because of your meetings.
Well, I just think we need to have more than a.
I'm saying if I just avoided that because I remembered a lot of times we have an issue there. So are we talking about Wednesday, January 7th now? At 5:30?
You mean Thursday?
Thursday, I'm sorry, Thursday the 7th. Is that okay with everybody?
In place of what, or another time?
In place of the 6th.
Okay.
At the same time.
Sure.
We move that one to Thursday. Saturday, start at 9, set at 10 on the 16th.
Okay.
Sounds fine.
And then we have two meetings on Wednesdays, both at 5:30. First of all, do we want to add a meeting on the 16th?
I think we should.
We should too, yeah.
Or do we want to go to the 23rd, which is different Saturday, different time?
It's pretty close to Christmas.
Oh, yeah. No. January.
Okay, hello. Wrong month.
11 months, but.
Yeah, sorry. I'm tired, can you tell? Yeah, but either way.
Okay, do we want to do 23rd?
23rd at 4 or
At 4?
5 or something?
Now, is that a fifth meeting or is that in place of the 20th or 27th?
I would replace the 27th.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we'll go ahead and replace that. So we're still at 4. And January 7th, 5:30. January 16th at 9.
Mhm.
January 20th at 5:30. January 23rd at 4. So we have a Thursday, a Wednesday, and 2 Saturdays.
And that leaves the 27th if we absolutely have to have another one.
Okay? All right. And we will see if we can put something together online that we can try to go ahead and do some scheduling. And that was a good suggestion. Thanks.
Since we're kind of on this, did everybody see the list that Bruce put out for all of the interested parties that we were going to try and remind them and invite them to be speakers or come to one of these meetings?
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, I think I did.
I did as well.
Okay, just check and make sure that we didn't have any additions or corrections on that. So that
It
we
was the second list, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I liked that. I thought it looked good.
Okay, and then other people can come, but we'll invite those.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And, okay, so that's the 14th. So are they the only speakers or will we ask the public also to participate?
No, the 14th, I'm rethinking it and I'll be putting out the agenda tomorrow.
Good.
It'll be following the line that I think I put into the manager's update. And it'll have 4 prime subjects. One, we'll talk about the property. So we'll be able to show people relation to Les Shirley, to the creek, to other properties the city owns, that sort of thing. I kind of talk about that. And then the next thing will be to talk about the ZCS report, just saying these are the conditions of the buildings that are done.
We got the pictures.
Yes, yeah, that'll be part of the first section, Sam. And actually, I was going to suggest that you kind of walk us through that first part. The next was facility conditions and renovation costs. Third was funding scenarios. And fourth was to talk about the process after the 14th, which would be to talk about the schedule of those meetings we've got. But this is, the purpose of this meeting is to try to bring people up to speed that we know have an interest, but we really haven't had high participation in the previous meetings because we've had 4 different subjects. This brings them together and kind of a rah, let's go. And Sam and I have been talking, maybe we even after the 14th, but before the first meeting, we do 1 or 2 Saturdays or something where people can actually do a quick walkthrough so that they get an idea of what the space is before they talk. And again, give people, I haven't walked anybody through that didn't get excited when they saw it, so.
When you talk about the property, are you going to talk about the history of the site? Because, we really haven't, I think people really want to talk about the history and the significance of the history of it.
Mm-hmm.
That was my prime or first thought on this. But then when I started hearing more about the potential politics on that it was like, it will come along. But it was like, who do you invite to speak?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's something that I have on here for the discussion about the site. You know, if Sam is willing to do that, maybe Sam can talk about it some.
Well, have we talked to the Clatsop tribe or anybody like, we really need to include them.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
have
Dick
been-
Bash.
I have been in contact with tribal representative, Dick Bash, and they definitely want to be one of the presenters. They are very involved. And they will move along beside us. I don't think they really want to do some of the stuff we had originally talked about, but I want to let them do it. We're going to invite them to come on one of the 4 days that we've scheduled.
Sam, I did have a discussion with Doug, and he was going to talk to Dick and maybe be part of the presentation on the 14th.
Oh, good.
I just had not heard back from Doug yet.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I want to make sure that even if they don't come, I want to make sure they feel welcome and that we want them. I don't want them to feel left out at all.
Yeah.
And I do want to hear what they have to say.
Right.
So if Doug and the tribe can do something together, that'd be wonderful. But I really don't want, we really need to include them.
Yeah, because otherwise it feels like a backseat position, and
I
don't think it should be.
And I apologize to you folks that this has all been kind of happening at my level. I've been working with Dick pretty closely, keeping him apprised of what we've been talking about.
Good.
He is not always in the neighborhood. He has another place up in Washington, and so he's not always in touch. So,
And we have to have that whole sense.
Yeah.
Before we move on and start talking about what needs to be done there, but.
Okay. You got enough there, Bruce?
Yes, sir. Are you willing to jump in on that first item?
Yeah, we'll bring me up to speed on it. We'll get there.
Okay, cool. I will do that. And then I have the dates that we will be publishing.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is retreat. Got some topic lists here that we want to add. Bruce?
Yes, I sent you, there's a staff report, which I'll get to in a minute. There was also a memorandum that took the items from last year's retreat and kind of put a status on those, because the suggestion was that we follow up on or include the whatums. I just made that word up. Okay, cool.
Good job.
Bruce had a good night, yeah. Whatums. Okay, but yeah, the different items that had been on the list, and then talked about what's been accomplished, what has not been accomplished, so that you can choose items from that list if you wish to. And then also staff is suggesting 3 items, and I want to add a 4th, which I think you will probably join me on. That is talk about the strategic plan. If you think it's going to take too much time to talk about the strategic plan at the retreat, we can always put it on a workshop. But I did send a status report to you today on the items. It'll give you, kind of a start on it. Some of them we may just want to remove, others we want to update. But the 4 items, including the strategic plan update, staff would like to suggest that council consider starting the regular meetings at 5:30, either 5:30 or 6. Planning Commission, others, are in that 5:30 to 6 range. That's just a suggestion. The need to provide additional resources to community development staff if we're going to continue all the initiatives. LUBA, we anticipate that some of these will go to LUBA and then potentially to civil court that we're dealing with right now. CSP, dealing with routine matters, staffing the planning and council initiatives, that sort of thing. What we're thinking is that if you want to continue the code audit alongside everything else that's going on, we don't think that we'll be able to do that at the staff level or to give it the justice it deserves. And so, again, we don't have to decide it tonight, but we want to talk about how else can we try to maintain this somewhat aggressive schedule with just the two people we have in the department. And then the third, we're at the point in the utility system, we have a master plan for water and wastewater. We have, again, Karen and Jen have done some amazing work to find some excellent loans that have served us for a couple of small projects so far. And we are preparing, for example, on the water resiliency. The phase one was to take care of everything from the Woodhams, the springs, the spraying down, the line back up to the tank, replace the tank, and then from the tank down to the RV park. So we will have a water source as opposed to trying to buy, water purifiers and all that. This will be a treated water system coming in. And then also it makes a lot of sense to put in a backbone, which is to go to the Tolovana tank. And right now, the water line that goes to the north end kind of goes through the downtown area, underneath the bridge, and then goes up. We think that we need more strength there by putting something on 101 that goes and feeds that tank. But if we're going to do these things, we don't have the funds to do it. When we apply for the loans, we have to say, yes, we will raise rates to do this. So what we need is that, there's a real trade-off in either way. If you're going to do and try to get the system to where you'd like to see it, you have to raise rates. If you don't want to raise rates, understandable, but then we have to say, okay, what few projects will we do, or what will we target, as opposed to trying to be more aggressive with the whole complete process. So we're at that point that we need to have that discussion for us. Do we continue on with the $3.2 million water supply resiliency, or do we say, sorry, we're not going to pursue it this time? So that's the kind of discussion.
Is there a possibility that we could put the code audit off for a while? Because it appears that we have so many things happening right now. I guess, how much is it going to cost for somebody to come in as a consultant to do that, that knows our community and would fit what they would like to manage along with? I don't know. It just seems like it's just one more thing that's.
It is. It will be. And it depends on how long you want to wait. I don't know how long the cycle will be that we're kind of in now.
Well, we're so stacked up right now with everything we're doing.
Pardon?
We have 7 meetings this month.
I know, yeah.
And next month looks very similar to that.
Yes.
It's good to, again, prioritize those. Right now, as we run into a problem, we say, oh, we're going to address that when we look at the code revisions. So maybe rather than just going through the whole code and say we're going to clean it all up, at least look at those parts of the code that we already know have given us some problems and set out a priority for those 4 or 5 items. We've already taken care of a couple, but certainly the lot size or housing sizes is a part of that. And of course, you say, well, that probably shows up in 8 different places in our ordinances.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we need to do something on it rather than just say, well, wait until the next problem shows up and then close the barn door after it's already hit us. If we could at least we know some of those already. Let's
Mhm.
repair them and address the ordinance. You know, as we have time, but at least give a ranking. So when there is time, this is one I'm going to work on, rather than just say, we're just going to get a consultant or somebody come in and do a wholesale cleanup of our.
Yeah, I like that idea where we might focus on one or two or three items.
I think that, well,
If I might jump in here a second, this is a discussion about what we're going to be talking about at the retreat,
Yeah.
not starting the retreat tonight. So all of what you're talking about, I think is great. But I'm freezing here and I'm ready to go home, and let's talk about this really in depth, because you've got good points that I want to hear on the retreat.
Yeah, I think you're right.
so we're good with those 4 items? Okay, all right, and then it's whatever items that you want. And you do have a list from last year, but you can also add anything you want.
I would like to have us look into the possibility. I mean, maybe the beach bill is totally off the table right now, or they've still, as they had mentioned, would like to continue doing that, but they might have a deadline of how that money could be used.
What are you talking?
It's the Beach Bill Environment
Yeah.
Council. And they wanted to do something to commemorate the beach bill.
Yeah.
And I hate to just take it off the table if it's still something they're wanting to work with us on.
Yeah, and I can call Kevin on that.
Okay.
I think that our $35,000 you folks had agreed to, it did not make it into this budget, but it's something that, you know, we can talk about matching what, you know, is it the Environmental Council?
Mhm.
Okay, the Environmental Council might be able to generate. And, but when I talk to them, as a matter of fact, if you want to do a conference call, I can set that up, Robin.
I'd like to do that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
I don't know what their feeling is as far as trying to raise revenue right now.
Well, it was a celebration of the 50th. Yeah, and I think for that reason, it still might be, I'm hoping, at the top of their list, but I haven't talked to Kevin, so I'm not sure.
I'll try to set something up next week and I'll check your calendar.
Okay.
I'm also interested, I don't know if there's any reason at all on the short-term rentals, if there's any little, at least a small report about whether the committee has met, what they've discussed, anything like that, that we could kind of get a feeling for whether there's been any discussion at all by the committee. Because
I can-
like we appointed a committee and then I've never heard anything back.
I've been getting some feedback. Several members, they would just like to dissolve it. Just create division, each have their own camp. And they're
Well, I
not.
need to hear that,
Yeah.
I guess.
So you had on this list, looking at terminating E-Prep, we're just going to add, let's take a look at other committees, and certainly that's one of them. Seems like it wasn't really supposed to end for a year, you know, so.
It actually was a 4-year project, so I'm surprised there's not a whole lot there, but there are definitely positions in there. All right, the school site, we have them going, so I don't think we need to, we might want to have a little bit of a discussion at the retreat, but
Probably shouldn't. We got a lot of other stuff.
yeah, that's it. But if we need to, you know, we could. Emergency management, Rick, Sam and I had asked Rick to do a 15-minute presentation saying, after COVID, we think this is what we're going to be doing. Human resources, the one-way traffic plan, that'll be part of the TSP. Southwind, we don't have anything in the work plan in the budget right now. Affordable housing, same thing. Short-term rentals, we formed the committee, comprehensive plan. And this is, you know, I'm tying it to the code audit. the code audit doesn't, like the next one that says ordinance review and it references Nicholson, small boat launch garages, ADU accessory structures. That probably won't come up in the code audit because the idea of the code audit was how well, I mean, we like our comprehensive plan. How well is it supported by the code? And that was the audit. It wasn't to try to solve all things. But some of these may come up under that anyway, when we start talking about what will we allow in the future. Special events, we'll on that on the second. Long-term financing with different alternatives like food and beverage, bonds, parking fees. Doesn't seem like now is a good time to talk about new fees and charges. Utility rates, I talked about wanting that on the discussion already. Strategic planning process. Strategic planning can be a very thorough or involved process. I think that we can get some mileage if we just look at the status report, say, let's take this out, let's put this in, and just kind of do a midterm. It's a little bit past midterm because it was through 2021, but just without going through a whole visioning process and all that. I think that there's just some things in here that don't make sense anymore. I don't know. You see the whole list.
Love to be able to purchase more watershed acreage, but there's the money. If there's some way to seek grants for that, it'd be worth pursuing.
Yep. Well, from the topic standpoint.
So you think that should still be on?
I think it's going to be part of our long-term vision. It should always be an objective. I don't, we can say it's going to be this plan for next year. I don't know how we would accomplish it, but I'd not want to lose sight. And I think before, if we had had a fund available, I think there was some acreage we could have purchased.
I'm sorry?
It's available from
well, and we can always talk to Greenwood.
Yeah, get maybe a long-term view. Say, well, they're going to clear cut some area that's adjacent.
Yeah.
And 6 years from now, we start building a fund to make that a purchase.
Okay, I'll take that as a yes on the list.
Okay, are we all good?
Well, we've added one item to the four.
Okay.
And I tell you what, well, and what we can do, we got a meeting. We're going to meet on the 14th. I don't know if you want to have two people request that we put it on, I don't care. I just thought that you would want a list of the meeting so that everybody can pull together their thoughts.
Yeah. It's always nice to know what it is we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm such a radical.
Wind up kind of spreading the gaps anyhow, so we'll fill in what's missing. So.
Right. So why don't we send out the agenda that's got the four items that the staff asked for, the list from last year, and then y'all can pick and choose as you go through.
Okay.
Okay?
Sure.
So I have some questions about that day. It starts at 11, it goes to 4. Do we want a lunch break? Do you want me to bring in some sandwiches? What are the thoughts?
Sure.
Yeah. Just lunch.
Yes, please.
Half-hour break for lunch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably, I think in the past we did break, but we could work through.
Yeah, we'll work during that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have our masks on so they won't be chewing in front of everybody.
Jen, did you have any other? I know that we're, for good of the order, we got one we want to bring up, but is there anything else for that agenda?
No, I will post the agenda tomorrow because that first meeting is next Tuesday. And so what I saw in the past was they just did a start and end time, and then as a separate document, they added the list topics. Or the list of the topics that was on their website. So we'll get that posted up for tomorrow.
Okay, then we're all to the end. Good of the order. There was something that Jen sent me, but I don't see Margaret on the list here. So
No, this wasn't something that Margaret had requested. She had requested that well, she gave a report on the North Coast Rocky Habitat Coalition. She also asked for a letter of support. And we happened to get a letter around the same time with someone that wasn't quite in agreement with everything. So you have both bits of that information. In the past, staff has written letters of support on things that we think are obvious, would probably be supported by council, ask the mayor to sign them, or else I sign them. But I was a little slow to do that one because we did have somebody that had some comments. So
Oh, I kind of feel this one is so extensive and encompassing so much without a more thorough discussion. I'm not comfortable.
I haven't even had a chance to read it. I mean, we got it at what, 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah.
I was too busy with other issues. So I haven't even had a chance to read it, except to look at the map.
Yeah.
Well,
But,
it doesn't explain what restrictions would really mean and how they can be enforced and who's going to. There are a lot of questions come to mind as you read that. So supporting environment, yes, but supporting the plan, the proposal that's laid out there, I think we need some real discussion on it.
You want that at a workshop, or should I ask Margaret to come to the retreat? I think workshop
I
probably
think
better.
workshop would be
But
better.
What she's looking for is a letter of support, hopefully by the 23rd. For whatever reason, she has something she's applying for.
Well, if we have it at our retreat, we could.
We have so much else that we're talking about.
About probably 30 items.
Huh?
Probably about 30 items.
Yeah, and we have what, 4 hours each day?
Yeah.
5 hours each day at the most.
We can just tell her that we would like to have a further discussion. We wouldn't be able to do it until the January workshop. So we won't be able to get her the letter on her time frame, but we wanted to have more information.
I like that.
And we probably, if you folks have questions or specific questions, if you get those to me, so it's not just me saying you have questions and not able to give her anything. So that would probably help.
So is this going to interfere with a grant application that they might want it, or a designation?
I don't know.
Can we find that out
Yes.
before we make a decision not to discuss it until after the fact?
Okay, Jen, did she give you any specific information on what the time frame was for the letter?
Let me hop into that note real quick. Initially, she said she wanted to give an update. We thought it would just be a quick update to send you guys so you could read it. And then she asked the letter of support. So we do apologize for the short notice. We thought it was just going to be send you some information.
Yeah, instead of having your,
Our group would greatly appreciate a letter of support from the council or as a body, or letters from individual counselors. Please send the letters to by December 23rd. Preferred format is PDF, but other formats are accepted. Letters will be submitted to the Rocky Habitat Working Group with the proposals on December 31st. So she's sending it in with a proposal for the Rocky Habitat Working Group.
is the proposal included in her email?
Yes, that was the proposal summary. She said she did a proposal summary, and that was what we forwarded today.
Okay.
It's quite long. It's
Yeah,
8
it is.
pages long.
And that's just a summary.
Yeah.
And she did say if you have any concerns or questions, she'd be happy to come and discuss them with you guys. So one of the other options, I guess, while we're thinking about it is if we do the findings on the 14th at 5 o'clock, you're just doing the findings. Do you want me to see if she can come on the 14th and we can do the findings and have her do a presentation for you guys? Because then you have a 6 o'clock meeting, or do you want to do the findings and have a break before your 6 o'clock meeting?
I don't think I want to put that in on top of
Okay.
all the
There's
schools.
going to be ample opportunity for a program like this to get involved in it. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to depend on one letter.
I was going to say, is the one letter really?
I mean, if it's for a grant or something, that might be,
Try to create this, so.
How about if we do a letter, ask the mayor to sign it, or I can sign it, endorsing the concept of considering, a larger slice or something without supporting any particular projects or anything.
can we say in the letter that we have not yet explored the specifics of the proposal, but we approve the concept of it?
How about if we say we look forward to hearing the specifics? We agree with the concept, but we look forward to learning more about the specifics of what you proposed. And then that way we can get the letter without endorsing anything in particular.
Can you send that letter again? Because I don't know if I
Yeah,
was able to get it.
Jen, just the letter from Margaret.
Yeah, it was on the email I sent when I said.
No, but I don't mean Margaret's. I mean the other letter.
What other letter?
What other letter?
Didn't you say there was a letter of objection?
Oh, that was in.
That's part of it.
Margaret's.
Oh, okay.
It's attached.
Okay.
So they just one right after the other.
Okay.
Robin, I didn't see so much as an objection. It was, I have concerns, I'm involved with this kind of thing. And I think it kind of mirrored Mike's concerns that it's really big. So. But anyway, we'll do that letter.
Well, certainly there's nothing stopping individual counselors from responding as she asked for.
Correct. Right. I think we have consensus for mayor to sign a letter we'll put together for him.
Yeah.
As described, okay.
Okay, anything else for good of the order?
I just would ask that because of all these upcoming meetings, if Jen would be able to do a calendar reminder for us, if that's possible.
I will do that tomorrow when I come in.
Thank you very.
We're gonna have to get 5 of the calendars that Robin uses to get all the meetings on there.
With plastic.
Yeah, that's right.
I have desk calendars if you'd like.
Well, that's all that staff has, sir.
Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.